Hello, everyone. Last time I talked about my recent analysis, which was going back to the five most recent generations in my family line pertaining to my ancestry, and now I'm going to do the advanced timeline, which my advanced analysis, which goes back to six generations ago and prior, and this is pretty interesting because no ancestry test has gone further back than five generations, if I'm remembering correctly. So, just from seeing where some of these are, the United States is an interesting choice because that didn't show up anywhere in my most five recent. Of course, the Caribbean isn't surprising because my family lineage is Caribbean. Obviously, there's a lot of African in my ancestry because, one, I am predominantly African, sub-Saharan African, especially West African, so that's not surprising. And it was very prolific in my gene pool, and I discussed that in the last video. Of course, there's the European, which isn't shocking from anyone who comes from the New World. And I do see South Asian and Southeast Asian. So what's interesting about this is that on damn near all of my other ancestry results, South Asia is prevalent and it shows up. Sometimes it shows up even more than the European. So the fact that it wasn't in my recent analysis, though based off my lineage and some other tests, the Indian or South Asian is more recent than my European, that's interesting. The Southeast Asian is kind of shocking, though I'm wondering if some of that was just misread South Asian, but we'll see as we go down into it. I'm really not going to make this too long compared to my last one, so I don't know if I'm going to read all of it. So when it comes to advanced ancestry analysis, we have combined cutting-edge genetic research with the anthropological history of the human race to create your advanced ancestry report. This report is an analysis that dates back thousands of years, well beyond your last five generations and most recent ancestry. So that's what makes CRI stand out more compared to essentially every other ancestry test. The team at CRI compared your DNA to reference populations that have been discovered and genotyped from all over the world. We factor in the known history of human migration patterns over the last several thousands of years before assigning them to your report. This process allows us to link you through your ancestral lines to vast regions that span well across the planet. The results you see below reflect the quote-unquote oldest ancestries in your family history. Populations of men and women that lived thousands of years before the most current nations, such as Germany or Britain, even existed, which is very interesting. So when I'm reading the countries, obviously, when you're looking at your distant ancestry, these countries haven't existed yet, but you just have to take in the area, or even like the tribe or whatnot. However, your report will still include these country and region names in order to best help you identify which geographic location your genetic makeup arose from. Okay. Just interesting, it just shows up like this. Let me click down. Okay, actually no, it's not that shocking. All of this pretty much showed up here. I do recall the Isan, the Yoruba, the African Caribbean, the Luya, the Mendi, and the Gamipia showing up in my recent ancestry, so I'm not going to reread those. But there is one change, and that is African American. So the only known African American immediate family member that I know that I have is like a very distant first uncle. So he's siblings to my parents, our half sibling to one of my parents, and I only found out this person existed because I did my ancestry in 4 years ago at this point, and I was making my family tree, and this person saw my family tree and they messaged me, so that's how I knew. So it's interesting how you hear stories like that, but it actually happened in my life. But that would have been a generation ago, and that wouldn't have been in my direct lineage because it was a long lost uncle, essentially, who moved to the States. But when you're looking at genealogy, you're looking at your parents, then your grandparents, and your great grandparents, because you inherit half from each parent, and then they inherit half from their parents, roughly 25% from each grandparent, so on and so forth. So, based off of this result, the 3% distant African American ancestry that I have would have been distant, so 6 and prior generations. And when it comes to the slave trade, sometimes they did deliver people from the Caribbean to the United States or Canada, or they delivered a slave from Canada, United States to the Caribbean. So I'm assuming that's how it could have happened with me having very, very, very distant African American ancestry. So, okay. So we have the Isan in Nigeria, which took up 44%, which I'm pretty sure is the same. So this genotype is represented through the people in closely neighboring geographical regions such as Nigeria, Benin, and Togo. These three countries show up in all of my results, so that's really not shocking. So the most populous nation in Africa, Nigeria is home to literally hundreds of distinct cultures within rich histories. Isan roots have been traced to the Benin Empire, which occupied the southern region of what is Nigeria today. The Benin Empire was considered one of the oldest and most advanced civilizations of the West Africa until it was annexed by the British colonists in 1897 after several years of war. With a rich history that could be traced as far back as the 11th century, the Benin Empire was among the most resistant to European colonial rule. Today, Isan people are mostly located in a region known as Isanland, which is a modern term meant to represent the 35 different clans of Isan people. Some people believe the name Isan is derived from a phrase that suggests to have fled or to jump away, which could be related to the Isan people that have left the Benin Empire. Okay, so I'm just going to look at my recent analysis quickly, because I'm wondering if the numbers are different. Yes, I knew something was different. So on my recent analysis, the Yoruba is 45% and the Isan is 15%. But on my advanced analysis, it's essentially the other way around, with the Isan being 44% and the Yoruba being 14%. So this can mean a few things. So either my distant ancestors were mainly Isan and some of them either intermarried with the Yoruba, and throughout the generations, they continued procreating with Yoruba. So when it came to my recent analysis, the Yoruba grew larger and the Isan grew shorter. So I'm assuming that might have happened here. Okay, so on to the Yoruba. Okay, yeah, I'm not reading all this over again because I already did that. This genotype is represented throughout the people in closely neighboring geographical regions such as Nigeria, Benin, Togo, Ghana, and Ivory Coast. All these countries show up on my ancestry tests that I've done. This really isn't shocking. I'm not reading all that. African Caribbean. So I'm assuming that because the Caribbean is still a newer land or a newer colony or society compared to of other areas, it has these genotypes listed, but let's read it. The African Caribbean genotype is represented throughout people in closely neighboring geographical regions, such as. So it's interesting that they don't have the countries of the Caribbean, but they have the African countries. But we're going to read it now. Senegal, Mali, Congo, Ghana, Cameroon, Guinea, Angola, Gabon, Ivory Coast, and it has Taino here. So the Taino are the indigenous Caribbean people that were on the lands or the islands before the Portuguese and the Spanish and the British and the French came over, and the diseases that the Europeans brought over killed them off. So, looking at the African Caribbean section in my advanced analysis, you do see the difference in my recent analysis with the countries that pop up. Right here, it does show you some Caribbean countries, but it has the European and some of the African. But I guess because it is advanced, which is older, they just went all in with the African. Okay. And the percentage is the same amount, 11%. So it could mean that distant and a lot of my ancestors came from Africa to the Caribbean within the most recent 5 generations. Maybe, but there's so many branches of the family tree when you go past the grandparents, since you have 8 great grandparents, 16 great grandparents, so on and so forth. So if like 14 of them are like one generation removed from Africa, that might make sense. So the Luya in Kenya, I'm shocked that Kenya came up because it never showed up on any of my tests anyways. So the neighboring countries of Kenya are Tanzania, Sudan. I'm wondering if it's South Sudan, but I don't think they distinguish them on these ancestry tests like that. And Uganda, I've already read that. Read the Mendi, but this refers to people from Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea, Mali, Ghana, and Mauritania. Mauritania, I've never gotten on any of my ancestry tests, but I do know that I've gotten at Mali a lot on almost every single one of them. So I'm assuming that the Mendi is kind of misreading, or it's another version of stating Mali. And the Gambia obviously refers to the similar countries: Mali, Mauritania, Gambia, Senegal, and Guinea. Now, the African American is something that never really popped up, but let's read the African American stuff. So, the African American genotype is represented through people in closely neighboring geographical regions such as Senegal, Mali, Congo, Ghana, Cameroon, Guinea, Angola, Gabon, and Ivory Coast. Obviously, this makes sense since the African Americans, or the people that would eventually become African Americans, their ancestors were taken from West Africa, and these are obviously West African countries. So, the term African American could apply to any person of African descent who lives in the United States, but it's generally applied to the descendants of enslaved people who were captured in Africa and forcibly transported to the United States of America. So, they make up their own ethnicity and ethnogenesis. These are different than Afro Jamaicans or Afro Brazilians, Afro Trinidadians, stuff like that. They each have their own different ethnogenesis. It would be easy to assume that African American ancestry is generally West African ancestry, as it is where most of the enslaved Africans came to the Americans from. However, this would not tell the whole truth about who African American people are from a genetic or a cultural standpoint. The effects of the slave trade on the African Americans living in the United States today have created a unique genome and culture that is now distinct from the West African ancestors. The genetic uniqueness of African Americans is largely due to their blending with people from other nations in American society, and not just West African nations. According to genetic studies, the average African American has anywhere between 70% and 85% West African ancestry, 15 to 25% European ancestry, and a very small percentage of Native American ancestry. Individual percentages will vary greatly. I know for Jamaicans and a lot of Black Caribbean people, or at least the Anglo and the Francophone Black Caribbean people, the genetic studies and the admixture is very similar to African Americans, where I know a lot of Haitians, Jamaicans, Bahamians, so on and so forth. And Black Caribbean people in general have roughly around 70 to 85% West African ancestry and 50 to 25% European ancestry. So this mixed ancestry is partially due to the white slave owners fathering children with their captive African women. Much of the European ancestry found in African Americans can also be traced to the Great Migration of the 20th century, which started around 1910 and continued all the way to 1970. During this time, millions of African Americans migrated north and west, fleeing the severe oppression of the South. While these refugees were still often met with discrimination in their new homes, there is genetic evidence that the northern and western states are at least slightly more tolerant and accepting than the deep South, as African Americans living in the North and West United States often have higher percentages of European heritage than those in the South. So essentially, they procreated with white people, they created mixed offspring, and then they either married white people or they continue procreating with their own mixed people, creating an MGM, multi generationally mixed population. Despite this dark history of oppression, African Americans have played a significant role in forging American culture as we know it today. Every aspect of American culture, from food to literature to music. Peanut butter, potato chips, and countless other staples of American food were invented by African Americans. Interesting, I didn't know all of that. The most popular cuisines of the South came from African Americans. Perhaps the biggest contribution to the American culture is in music. Almost every one of the most popular genres of music can be directly traced to African American origins. Hip hop, R&B, rock and roll, blues, jazz, even country and bluegrass. So when it comes to the slavery and some of the minor admixture as well, that also relates to people of Caribbean descent. And that's why even I have slightly European ancestry, despite me being overwhelmingly African. And it's interesting that looking at my advanced analysis, I'm 97.9%, so essentially 98% African, where I was only 91% in my recent analysis. So on to Europe. This is interesting because compared to my recent analysis, it showed Poland and Italy. Neither one of them are in Northern Europe or Northwestern Europe. Anyways, let's read this, and it's only 1.1%, so 1%. This genotype is represented throughout people in closely neighboring geographic regions such as Finland, Norway, Denmark, Lithuania, Belarus, Poland. Oh, guess maybe that's where it came from. Sweden, Russia, Estonia, Latvia, Ukraine, and Kaliningrad. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think on Ancestry or whatever, I got very, very, very little Ashkenazi Jewish. So I'm wondering if this, and maybe the Polish, is the indicator of that. I don't know. Anyways, let's read into it. Northern Europe can be loosely defined as the region that stretches through Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. So just to name a few, essentially Scandinavia. This region was permanently settled by modern humans for the first time roughly 10,000 years ago or more, as the ice sheet covering most of Europe began to recede during the Stone Age. The first modern humans to settle the region were ancient Germanic tribes and the Sami people, also known as Laplanders. The migrants of Germanic tribes played a significant role in shaping the genetic makeup of Europe. The nation of Germany got its name and cultural identity from these northern European migrants. Likewise, the Anglo-Saxons that helped forge the identity of Britain were descendants of the Germanic tribes of northern Europe. No, I don't think I got any Germanic ancestry, but I do know there's some overlap between the British and the Germanic, so maybe this is how they read it. Many people associate Northern European history with that of the Vikings. The Vikings were one of the most mobile populations in human history, as they sailed to almost all parts of Europe as far as south as North Africa and as far east as Iran. Viking travels brought them at least as far west to settle Iceland. Archaeological evidence has revealed that they even reached North America centuries before Christopher Columbus. These conquests by Vikings and ancient Germanic tribes spread Northern European DNA to almost all populations of Europe. So Northwestern Europe, and this makes sense because these are the areas that essentially control or they colonized the Anglo-Caribbean, so Northwestern Europe. This makes sense. This includes France, Switzerland, Netherlands, Slovakia, Luxembourg, Norway, Germany, Belgium, Denmark, Hungary, Sweden, and Kaliningrad. It's interesting that, oh no, they separated the British Isles, but there's some overlap. So, the region of northwestern Europe can be defined as the Atlantic and Mediterranean coast of France to the eastern edge of Germany and the northern tip of Finland. This region was first settled by humans as far back as 4,500 years ago. At the time, vast glaciers during the last ice age limited migration. Those glaciers began to retreat roughly 200,000 years ago, and by 10,000 BC, human settlers expanded to settle newly habitable regions of Europe, such as Scandinavia. Since then, northwestern Europe has seen near constant human migration, both peaceful and violent, that is both culturally diverse and genetically related. Celtic cultures were among the first to arise in northwestern Europe. While many people associate Celtic cultures with Ireland and Scotland, Celtic cultures are actually believed to have originated in Austria and spread outward from there. As far back as 2,500 years ago, Celtic cultures dominated the regions of France, Germany, Austria, Italy, the Iberian Peninsula, and the British Isles. The Scandinavian portions of northwestern Europe were dominated by Germanic cultures who eventually moved south and spread their influence the regions of Germany, Austria, and parts of France. Around the same time, the Roman Empire was rising to power, which temporarily limited the expansion of Germanic cultures and pushed much of the Celtic cultures of France into the regions of Ireland and Scotland that we associate with them today. So, when the Roman Empire fell, Germanic tribes swept across northwestern Europe until Frankish rulers rose to power in France. A quote unquote new culture blended Roman and Celtic descent. Interesting. The Frankish kingdom of Charlemagne was dominant enough that he was crowned Emperor of Romans, blah blah blah. I really don't give a crap about any of that. Almost 1,200 years ago, Charlemagne's empire was divided up by his grandsons into what would eventually become the nations of northwestern Europe that we know of France, Germany, etc. The cultures and genome of northwestern Europe holds the secrets of these several centuries of intermingling. Alright, so that's it for the European. So it's interesting that the South Asian shows here and it's only 0.5%, which is less than 1%. Because what's interesting is on my Ancestry and 23andMe results, it shows that I'm like 6% South Asian and it's immediate. And based on my timelines, that is more recent than my European. But I'll get into that once I post those results. Let me European. Okay, so with the South Asian, there's three areas. So there's Bengali, Punjabi, and Gujarati Indian. So the Bengali, so that's essentially Bangladesh. So this genotype is represented throughout people in closely neighboring geographical regions such as Bangladesh, Pakistan, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait. That's interesting because that's in the Gulf Arab. Yeah, it's in the Gulf Arab Peninsula. Maybe it's migration, I don't know. Anyways, India, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Bahrain. So essentially, South Asia and the Gulf countries. Interesting. So, but yeah, Bengal and Bangladesh has shown up a lot on my ancestry results as well, so I'm not really shocked by that. So, the word Bengal or Bangla is believed to be derived from the Vanga kingdom, an ancient empire that occupied today's Bangladesh. There are multiple ancient kingdoms in this region, including some vassals to the Gupta Empire, which occupied the Indian subcontinent roughly 1,600 years ago. History blurs the names and timelines of the many kingdoms that existed in ancient Bangladesh. But one thing is consistent they had a fierce reputation. When Alexander the Great's Greek army invaded India roughly 1,700 years ago, they referred to the Bengali kingdom at the time as Gangaride, meaning nation of the Gangs, referring to the Gangs Delta region. Many Greco-Roman writers claim that Alexander the Great retreated from India out of fear, believing that a valiant counterattack from the Gangaride was imminent. Bengali people also have a rich history of literature going as far back as the 10th century. The first known written literature was the Charyapada, a collection of Buddhist mystic songs. The culture and history of Bengali people has since been largely influenced by Hinduism and Islam, as the majority of Bengali in Bangladesh today are Muslim, while the majority of Bengali in the Indian state of West Bengal are Hindu. West Bengal, was that Pakistan or maybe India? But I do know that when the country split, a lot of people from different religions migrated and caused a lot of the worst stuff that happened. Like many people of South Asian descent, the genetics of today's Bengali people have been largely influenced by Veda, Mediterranean, Persian, and Arab rulers that invaded throughout the history of the Bengali population. So now we're moving on to Punjabi. So that's, yeah, Punjabis in India and Pakistan. So this genotype is represented throughout people in closely neighboring geographic regions such as Pakistan and India. And from what I've researched, I do believe that the Indian admixture in Jamaicans, or the Indo-Jamaicans, they came from northern India. I have to do more research on that. So, the word Punjab is derived from a Persian phrase meaning the land of five waters, referring to the five tributaries of the Indus River that make up the Punjab region in eastern Pakistan and northern India. Considered one of the most fertile regions of the world, Punjab was home to the Indus Valley Civilization, aka the Harappan civilization, which is one of the oldest civilizations in the world. It's also thought to be one of the largest civilizations of the ancient world. While the Harappan Empire is long gone, the Punjab region today is still one of the largest sources of food for all of Pakistan and India. The Punjab genome has seen significant fusion over the years as the region has been subject to several invasions throughout history from the Persians, Greeks, Mughals, Pashtuns, British, and more. Almost all of them seeking control of the productive Madhya region of Punjab, the hub of Punjabi culture. Despite this near constant transformation of the Punjab region, Punjabi people have remained united in culture and language. However, they have become separated by religious differences. Most of the Punjabi population of today is Muslim, but there are over 30 million Punjabi Hindus and Sikhs as well. When Pakistan and India gained independence from the British Empire, up to 14 million Punjabi people were displaced by religious riots. So that's what I was kind of hinting at earlier when it came to the migration. Today, most Muslim Punjabi live in Pakistan, while most Hindu and Sikh Punjabi live in India. Several Punjabi people fled to Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom. Some historians claim that this, and it cuts off, but I do know this for sure because I live around a lot of Punjabi people. That's all I'm going to say. And then we're getting into Gujarati Indian. So I think that's here. So they're kind of similar, but I guess it's just a bit more south. So the genotype of the Gujarati Indian is represented through India. Okay. I don't think I'm going to read all this. Okay. The word Gujarat comes from the ancient Sanskrit word for Gujarat nation, which occupied the northwestern region of India in the states that are today known as Gujarat and Rajasthan. I think that one might have shown up when it comes to Indo-Jamaicans. I have to do more research on that. One of the first regions of Asia to be settled by humans as they migrated out of the Middle East from Africa, Gujarati people tend to have a higher proportion of Europe and Middle Eastern ancestry than many of the other populations of India. That I know because they're closer to the Middle East, so it kind of makes sense. As one of the first regions of Asia to be settled by humans, Gujarat was a pivotal piece for the Indus Valley civilization, home to large cities. The region of Gujarat has been an economic powerhouse throughout all of history, being a key pieces of multiple empires from the Islamic rulers in the Middle Ages to the Mughal Empire to the British Empire. Okay, I'm not reading all this right now, I'm just really not. Um, as the location of the first port in India, the Gujarati people also have a long tradition of seafaring and migration. Because of this, Gujarati people can be found literally all over the world. While the vast majority of Gujarati people live in India, there are large populations in the United Kingdom and the United States, where they continue to have a reputation of economic success. In the United Kingdom, Gujarati are credited with energizing the British economy and forever changing the retail laws there. In the United States, it is estimated that Gujarati people control up to 40% of the hospitality industry. It's very interesting to know. I didn't know that. And then we have the final category, which is East Asian. And these are very new to me. These have never shown up in any of my ancestry results, like whatsoever. But I'm wondering if some of this might have been misread South Asian, because I know there's some overlap there. We will see. Okay, so the genotype is represented throughout people in neighboring geographical regions such as Vietnam, Taiwan, Macau, King, Hmong, Cambodia, Malaysia, Laos, Khmer, and Muang. I do know that there are a lot of Jamaicans with Chinese descent specifically. On my ancestry tests, that's never shown up on mine, but I've seen several others, and I know several people who are of Chinese Jamaican descent. So, according to legend, there was a dragon lord of the sea named Lak Hong Kwan. Okay, yeah, I'm not reading that. While this makes for an interesting story, Vietnam was first settled as far back as 2,500 years ago during the last ice age. The myth about the Dragon Lord and the Angel appropriately sets the stage for the evolution of the Vietnamese cultures. Okay, that's all that. So, throughout history, Vietnam has seen a lot of cultural and genetic influence from other South Asian populations. Okay, that makes sense. I think that's where this shows up. I think it kind of misread the South Asian and transferred it to here, such as Khmer, Hmong, Campaign, Thai, and Southern Han Chinese. So wouldn't that be East Asian, not South Asian, or at least Southeast Asian? I don't know. While Vietnam is a richly diverse nation, people with keen ancestry makes up approximately 85% of the population of Vietnam. And then we have Chinese Dai, which is oh, okay. So that's not even China. That's mainly Southeast Asia, from what it looks like. Because I know Burma, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. That's considered Southeast Asia, not East Asia. And the fact that's at the bottom of China, maybe it's Burma. Yeah, something's telling me that this is misread South Asian, just based on I know there's some interlap between Bangladesh and East Asia. And yeah, I'm pretty sure this is misread South Asian. So let me continue on. So Chinese Dai. So the Shi type is represented through a people in closely neighboring geographical regions such as China, Thailand, Malaysia, Aceh, Yi, Singapore, Laos, Taiwan. So literally all of them but China is Southeastern Asia. Okay, so China is a richly diverse nation that is home to at least 56 distinct ethnic groups. People with Han Chinese ancestry make up the vast majority of the population of China, 92%, but there are several minority groups with distinct languages, cultures, and genetics. People with Chinese Dai ancestry are one of these groups. Dai people who can be called Thai almost interchangeably, so Taiwan, I guess, are generally similar to the Lao and Thai people of Laos and Thailand. Okay, so genetically, they're similar to Southeast Asian people, despite them being Chinese. Okay, the Dai people of China were typically farmers along the Mekong River, which is a river that starts in southern China and flows through Laos, Thailand, and other nations of Southeast Asia. Han Chinese originated in northern China, and it is believed that many of them either intermingled with the Dai of southern China or pushed them further south into Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. To this day, there are many different Thai languages and cultures. In Southeast Asia, the Chinese Dai are called Dai to differentiate them from other Thai cultures, as Chinese Dai have enough differences to be considered a distinct culture of its own. So I think that's where this came from, because they're in like the most southern part of China, and I know there's a lot of mountains up there somewhere. It probably distinguished them from the other Chinese people. So the East Asian and the South Asian would be like zero point 0.8, so almost 1%. Though I have a lot more of that in my recent ancestry just from looking at other ancestry tests. And I have a bit more European too, compared in my other ancestry results compared to the advanced analysis, though I have much less than what my recent analysis showed. I have a bit less African in my advanced analysis compared to my recent. And it's interesting that the Italian didn't show up anywhere here, though it was on my recent analysis. Okay, so I'm going to then talk about the advanced timeline separately, though I don't know how long that's going to be. Anyways, thank you for this, and I'll be back with more soon. Bye!